Hello, everyone. Welcome to Title Talk Real Estate in New York. I'm Brenda Posner with Langdon Title, and today we have a special guest, Adam Stone, who will be speaking to you about seller closing costs. And Adam, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Adam Stone. I am an attorney and I practice mainly in the area of real estate transactions in New York City and the surrounding areas. I've been doing this for over 20 years and have learned a lot about all types of transactions along the way. So happy to share what I know.
Thank you so much. So what types of closing costs can sellers expect to pay in a New York transaction?
Okay, so there are some closing costs that are constant for sellers, meaning they're constant no matter the type of property or the price point. So we're talking about New York City properties. This could be a co-op, a condo, or a 1, 2, or 3 family house or townhouse, we sometimes call it. There are a few big ticket items, and then there are a few smaller ones that we expect to pay. The big ticket items are New York City and New York State transfer taxes for one or for two. So New York City transfer tax is a percentage of the sales price. And any time that the sales price is above $500,000, let's just assume that it always is, because it almost always is in New York City, the percentage is 1.425%. So just under 1.5% gets paid to New York City. New York State has its own transfer tax. So New York State takes a piece as well, and that is 0.4%. Combined, the city and state transfer taxes are just under 2%, as you can see. I will add that if the purchase price happens to be less than $500,000, or I should say $500,000 or lower, the New York City tax rate for the transfer tax comes down to a straight 1%. So that's 1% instead of the 1.425%. The New York State percentage stays the same. So transfer taxes, New York City, 1.425%, or 1% if the price is low enough. New York State transfer tax is 0.4%. I should also add, because nothing is ever simple, that if you're selling a property in New York City, a residential property in New York City, and the price is $3 million or more, there is an extra, what we say, quarter point or 0.25% added on to that New York State transfer tax rate. So it becomes 0.65%. For people like me in the industry, this is relatively new. This is only 2 years old that they had this extra 0.25% added on for sales prices of $3 million or more. So just from answering this one question, we can see, oh, this gets a little complicated sometimes. It's not just as easy as this is the percentage, that's it, no matter what, which is why I always encourage agents or clients to talk to me about the specifics of their transaction. Let me run the actual numbers for you, and I'll make sure that we get everything squared away and a really good estimate of closing costs.
Okay, so when and how do these closing costs get paid?
Okay, so the closing costs that I just mentioned, the transfer taxes, get paid at the actual closing. So that means when the deal is completed, when the seller gets paid, when the seller transfers ownership, it all happens at once, and that's what we call the closing. And these transfer taxes get paid at the closing, and they get paid from the sale proceeds. So that might be from the 10% deposit that's in the seller's attorney's escrow account, or it might be that the seller's attorney instructs the purchaser to bring certain payments to pay closing costs. But the seller themselves should never have to write a check or pay any of these closing costs. The seller should get net proceeds at the closing.
Okay, that's great. Is there an easy way to estimate sellers' closing costs?
I guess you could say the easy way for sellers' closing costs, transfer taxes, if you just want to take an estimate, is going to be around 2% of the sales price. But The other big ticket item that most sellers have are paying the salesperson, the agent, the broker, whichever term you want to use. And I think we know that might be 6% of the sales price. Maybe for some reason in certain transactions, it's lowered to 5% or 4%, whatever the percentage is. And of course, that's outlined between the seller and their agent in the commission agreement. That's also one of the major closing costs, and that would get paid at the closing as well. So if you want to add that in, now we're looking at approximately 8% of the sales price would be closing costs. And then, I hate to sound like a lawyer, but depending on the details of each transaction, there might be additional closing costs involved. For example, if the seller is not a New York State resident and did not use this property as the seller's primary residence for at least 2 of the last 5 years, then an estimated New York State income tax has to get paid at the closing. And that will, of course, depend on certain factors, such as what did the seller pay for the property in the first place? What types of costs for improvements to the property were there? And other varying factors. So while you may want to say, okay, 8% is a good round number, there are always going to be other factors also. Of course, one of them being some buildings, mainly co-ops, have what we call a flip tax, which a better name for it would be a transfer fee. Meaning the co-op building, I suppose it's possible that the condo building also, but usually we see it with the co-op building, charges a transfer fee. And it's all depending on that particular building. Sometimes they charge a seller, sometimes they charge a purchaser, sometimes it's a percentage of the sales price, sometimes it's a dollar amount per share for the co-op. But that's one other factor that we can't just give a general number for. We have to look into it and actually run the numbers and come up with a good sort of line item estimate for all the costs.
So Adam, if we have any sellers or agents listening to us, what do you suggest? When is the best time for them to call you?
I think it's always best for a seller or their agent to get in touch when the property is being listed, which means before there's an accepted offer. I'm happy to give whatever information I can at that time based on estimates. Between the seller and the agent, we can probably guess the price range that this property is going to sell for. Based on that, I'll be able to run numbers of what you can expect for each closing cost. And I can also explain, well, if the price changes in this direction or in that direction, how would that affect these closing costs?
Okay, wonderful. So thank you very much. Thank you for your expertise. Anyone that has any questions, Adam's contact information is at the top of the screen. Please save that for your records and have a great day.